welcome to the latest in our series of webinars that we've been running to give some insight from the professionals into various areas of SAP. For those who haven't heard Blue Wave, we are an SAP specific recruitment firm, the highest rated in both the UK and Europe in terms of that space. And we're co-creators of SAP Network Plus, which you guys are all sat on right now watching this. My name's Alex. I'm an associate director with the company. I've been here for around six odd years, and we are joined today by Ali Bashir, who has longer in the SAP world. He is 20 plus years focusing on the SAP business intelligence space. He has worked with end users, consultancy across all the iterations, R3 and S4, and with those years of experience, he is going to be clearing up some of the confusions around Datasphere and giving a little bit more insight. It's worth mentioning at this point that Datasphere is a big piece. There is a lot of functional and technical elements we could go into, but we are limited for time here. So we'll be touching on various points as we move through this discussion. There is the opportunity to reach out directly, either to answer some questions or to actually book in a free consulting call with Ali. We've got 3 of those that we are going to be giving away. So there will be a form, or you can just email direct to get that underway. But we can move on to why we are all here to discuss Datasphere. So I will hand over to the very capable Ali Bashir. And I suppose we can start with, what is Datasphere?
Thanks for the intro, Alex. So SAP Datasphere is SAP's new release. It's the next generation of data management platform. And it allows organizations to integrate, manage, and analyze data from different source systems, from different sources. It doesn't really matter if the data is from SAP systems, non-SAP systems, or if the data is in the cloud or on-premise. SAP Datasphere is designed to be able to integrate with all of those sources of data. And you can basically integrate and manage that data. It provides a unified view to break all the data silos and enable holistic decision making on that data.
Cool. So that is a very brief overview just to kind of frame the conversation. But I suppose the question is kind of where this actually came from in terms of the evolution through SAP. And also, I think it is worth that we touch on kind of why now is the time that SAP have chose to launch this in terms of wider tech and industry conversation. So yeah, Ali, in terms of SAP history specifically, where did this kind of come from?
Yeah, so I agree. To really understand Datasphere, we need to understand the evolution of data warehousing with SAP. So SAP has always provided a data warehousing platform. Even when we go back to the R3 days, it had logistics information system data warehouse built into its R3 system, which provided reports. That had some performance issues because the system wasn't really designed for reporting and it was sitting inside R3. So in the 2000s, SAP released BW, which was a specifically designed system for OLAP processing, for data processing and for reporting. And it was a separate system from R3. So that was SAP's first data warehouse iteration, which was separate from R3 and designed for data warehousing. That had some performance issues around handling large volumes of data because in the 2000s, we were still using disk-based data warehousing. And so transferring large volumes of data was where most of the processing power and data storage was used. This evolved into BW on HANA and then BW for HANA, which is what we're on at the moment. BW on HANA and for HANA kind of revolutionized data warehousing because it's moved data warehousing from disk-based to in-memory data warehousing.
Right.
And that had a massive boost in performance for a lot of the reports that users were using. And it allowed us to design and model data in a different way to how we were doing before. So in the old way, in the disk-based world, we used to try to persist the data. We used to transfer the data from system to system and then persist the data at different levels in order to have the performance and to be able to report in a timely fashion. But with HANA, that all changed, where there's a bigger emphasis on virtualization and virtual data modeling. So now we try not to move data so much. It's more around virtually modeling the data models and using them in reports at runtime. So it's slight change in the way we model. And I think it's an important change because with Datasphere coming in now, that journey is continuing. There's a bigger emphasis on virtual modeling. There's a bigger emphasis on integration with the multiple sources of the data. And there's a bigger emphasis on not moving data so much as we used to in the past, but making sure that we can integrate the different systems, the different data sets, and be able to use them when we need them in a timely fashion.
Right, so it's a relatively natural progression from an SAP perspective as to how they came to this point of releasing Datasphere. We see them moving through their timelines, but in terms of how this runs parallel to the wider conversations going on in the tech industry and business more generally, in how they want to get more out in terms of insights and how they handle data, what does this align to in terms of the wider conversation? What do you think kind of has sparked this push right here, right now for Datasphere?
So there's many benefits of Datasphere, but one of the key benefits is the integration with AI. And as you know, in the industry now, AI is the buzzword. It's where all the companies are moving. And what Datasphere allows us to do is to get the data from multiple systems, bring it together and make it available to different co-pilots and agents, which we can develop ourselves.
So that's the crossover when you're talking so AI, and then we're also touching there a little bit on the kind of open partner model and also that kind of whole data fabric piece. So if we take those as, I'd say, the main highlights of some of the pros that are really going to sing out to businesses when pitching Datasphere or when being introduced to it, what is the kind of benefits that they bring, both in terms of AI, in terms of data fabric, and in terms of that open partner ecosystem there?
Yeah, so if we go back to the AI discussion, we still have AI Copilot within Joule, within SAC, which is called Joule. So SAP has released a Copilot already within SAC. And what AI allows us to do within Datasphere is to link it to different large language models. So large language models, whichever one you want to use, you can link it to Datasphere and consume that data within an AI agent that you design yourself. So you're not restricted just to Joule, which is coming from SAP. You can actually do your own agents as well. And you can use your different LLM models that you want to use. You're not restricted to just one. So there's a library of AI, business AI agents which SAP is releasing, functionality which SAP is releasing over time. And some examples of this, you can resolve errors identified during financial processing. So when you're doing your financial closing, you can use AI to identify some errors and resolve some of those errors. So that's some functionality which SAP have already released, and they're working on improving that. There's other examples where you can analyze, summarize financial data in a natural language. and share that to your organization. There's new functionality which SAP have released around behavioral insights for contract accounting to analyze the history of customer behavior and predict how and explain how what the payment risks are for different customers based on their history. So there's different functionality around AI which SAP is releasing out of the box, and this is being added to regularly. And what Datasphere allows you to do is to use that functionality as it comes in. Around data fabric, so data fabric is a term which is used within the industry, and it's around it's basically the foundation of a business data fabric architecture, the Datasphere. It offers a single service for data integration, cataloging, semantic modeling, data warehousing, and virtualizing workloads across all your data. So SAP out the box allows integration of Datasphere with non-SAP systems, your POS systems, any cloud-based systems, other data warehouses, and you can even integrate non-structured data as well into Datasphere. So that's where the data fabric comes in. And then you've got functionality within there around cataloging. You can categorize and add context to meaning and meaning to the data. So as it's traveling through the system, through the ecosystem, the meaning of the data is not lost. You can consume it upstream in different systems, and still the users will understand where the data comes from, how it's been touched, and how it's being used. So SAP refers to that as the lineage of the data, and the business basically have visibility over that whole lineage as the data travels. So it's all around making.
Sorry, go on. I was just going to say, you touched on there something I think that is quite a big thing that could be off-putting or could also be seen as then the benefit. People thinking, oh, if we've got Datasphere, do we have to kind of view all this through the lens of SAP? But you mentioned then that there is many ways that you can then consume this data out of Datasphere. That I think is the open party ecosystem. So could you tell us a little bit about that and how that comes into play?
Yeah, so the open partner ecosystem allows the data which resides within Datasphere to be consumed in any front end, any UX that you may want to use. So you're not restricted to just using, say, SAC or SAP's front end. You can use Power BI or Tableau or any third-party front end that the customer feels comfortable with, or the customer may have already had experience of using, but link it and consume the data within Datasphere, and SAP is allowing that to happen. So this, going back to the history of data warehousing, with BW and BW on HANA, a lot of companies were also implementing data lakes within the ecosystem alongside the data warehouses. And what Datasphere allows you to do is actually link into the data lakes as well and consume the data from the data lakes, make it available, and then consume it on the front end. And going forward, you don't need to effectively implement a third-party data lake. You can replicate a lot of that within the functionality of Datasphere. So it's allowing users to stay within the SAP ecosystem to do the integration piece, to do the data modeling piece, to make sure that there's consistency across all the systems and all the data, but then open up the front end system to allow consumption by the customer using any front end tool.
Great. So it's allowing both more functionality within SAP, but it's in no way kind of stopping you being able to use these systems that are favored in terms of that front end. I think something especially kind of C-suite and that senior leadership team will be particularly interested in because of how they have traditionally consumed data. As we kind of move on to that point, that whole piece around how this lands with leadership. Now, I'm sure there will be people either currently in the audience or watching this video later that may be going through the battle at the moment of making that pitch of going, this is something that we need to go for, but there will be that pushback from leadership. I'm imagining some of the pain points are probably going to be, what does this look like in terms of migration? And also, I think a key one is we've already got a BW system of some description, whether that is BW kind of on or for HANA. Why would we then make the move across when we've put all the money and created our kind of queries and stuff within this? Why would we then make the move? So in terms of those 2 points, from the BW standpoint, what are the kind of ways that you can handle that as an objection from your business users?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, because a lot of companies are quite mature with the data warehousing solutions, and they've invested a lot of money already into their systems. And SAP makes sure that you can keep your investment. So they've allowed an upgrade path to Datasphere. So if you already have a BW system, if you already have a BW on HANA or 4 system, you can use something called a BW bridge, which allows you to migrate that piece of development across into Datasphere. So some components of it will be migrated automatically, and then some components you will have to do manually. But there is a path of upgrade available, and it means that you can retain your investment that you've made. With Datasphere, as I've said, the major advantage is going to be around AI consuming your data warehouse with an AI agent and AI front end. And that integration that Datasphere allows, you're not going to get that with your existing BW system. But like I said, SAP have given a migration path to users to be able to do that. I think the key thing to also remember is that the migration will involve the developments that you've actually built within the system.
Right.
So anything that you've built in the system will be migrated, but also the data which you may have will also get migrated as part of the BW bridge.
Yeah, so you are taking all the work you've done does not go for naught. It kind of comes across to this new product and quite seamlessly, both in terms of keeping the stuff you put a lot of effort into, but also in terms of the ease of migration. So there is that BW bridge, and I mean, I suppose there will be some non-SAP people thinking about this as well. Very briefly, because I know that's an entirely other discussion, but it's still something where Datasphere, as part of SAP's whole kind of shift of data, if you're coming in as a new user, that's a relatively straightforward, not straightforward, but relatively accommodating process as well.
Yeah, so as I said, Datasphere is not restricted to integrating data from SAP systems. You can get data from non-SAP systems as well. And within Datasphere, you've got the whole data modeling tools available to you. I think one of the arguments currently, or one of the discussion points currently, is the functionality which is available at the moment in Datasphere, because it was just released to the public in 2023. And it's something that SAP is developing and upgrading and releasing functionality for every month. So it's improving every month in terms of functionality. So one of the discussion points I think what the business usually have is the current functionality, does it fulfill our reporting requirements and our requirements in terms of data warehousing? And I think that's something that needs to be looked at in an individual basis. We need to analyze what the reporting requirements are, and then look back at what the functionality is at the moment within Datasphere. But as was the situation with BW on HANA and for HANA a few years ago, SAP is developing the functionality very quickly. They are releasing new improvements monthly, and I think we'll see the system settle down and the functionality arrive soon. So I think it's one of those discussions that probably needs to be done on an individual basis with each customer and each site to see what the reporting requirements are and what we can do.
Yeah, and that, I suppose that brings us quite nicely onto the topic where from our standpoint as Blue Wave, we're obviously familiar with how we ramp up resource and capability for projects, and from your side, sitting as a solution lead, the insight there around what it takes to be running these projects and implement Datasphere or migrating from a resource perspective. Now, of course, there will be SAP on hand. You will have your internal capability in terms of general support, and there will also be probably a number of external partners, maybe providing governance, maybe providing technical build. But you were saying there about the kind of driving of what do you actually want to get out of Datasphere. I think that's maybe the first point where you would bring in your independent consultants. And what would that look like? I mean, from that standpoint, and then going through the actual end-to-end process, what is, I suppose, the importance of bringing in people who do sit as an independent layer, and what type of resources would you say normally you'd be looking at within a Datasphere piece?
Yeah, so because the data warehousing space has changed so much in terms of how we actually do the design, and the technology has moved on so much from the traditional data warehousing to now more of a virtual data modeling, and now with an AI front end. I think it's important to bring in experts who have the experience, and also people who can support the business in this journey, because the technology is moving so fast now, especially around AI and AI integration, that the business really do need support in making sure that they can utilize the technology as best they can. And because the business have the best understanding around the data, the processes, and their own business processes, I think what we do when we come in is really support the business in making sure that they can use the technology the way they want to use it, and a way that adds value to them. So some of the key roles, I think, which need to be really close to the business are roles like business analyst, so we can understand how the business want to use the system, what the processes are, and be able to explain that to the partners in terms of implementation. It makes the customers' experience much better, and reduces frustration, and it also makes the third party experience much better as well, because we act like a bridge between the two. Also roles like solution lead, solution architect, I think those need to work very closely with the business to make sure we solution something that fulfills their requirements. And also workstream lead and these kind of roles probably need to be close to the business.
Yeah, I think it's something where businesses do need to, of course, rely on those external partners and on their internal team, but I think there is the added bonus of everyone that is coming in with this knowledge as independent contractors that have been through this before, can advise on pitfalls maybe that they've seen with other clients, things that are good in terms of best practice that is found by them, because obviously there is the SAP best practice in that as well. And then also one thing we've noticed quite a lot recently is the capability that it will build in your in-house team. These kind of independent resources that come in can identify where there is those strengths and build on them within the internal team. And I think there is also a lot to say about managing external partners as well, because again, it's something where you guys have been through that process, you know what to look out for. So I think it's still a lean team. It's not necessarily that there will be a ton of people that are needed to be brought in, but it's very particular people for very particular kind of valuable, high value roles within this.
Yeah, I mean, when you say manage, what we really mean is collaborate, because the whole point is that we collaborate with all the different teams who are involved to make sure that we deliver something which adds value to the customer. And especially with this AI element now, as I said, it's moving so quickly in the industry. There's a lot of material out there, and it is getting a bit confusing as well, because you know, you have your Microsoft, you have your Googles pushing these AI tools, but then people are not quite sure how it sits in with the SAP world. And that's what we want to do. We want to work with the business to help them leverage the business data that sits within their systems and tie it in with their day-to-day work and the other co-pilots that they may be working with.
I think one thing as well that it is worth us just briefly touching on, because obviously we're getting towards the end of this, so we have touched on a few areas, and there is the opportunity to engage yourself, Ali, to explore some of these areas in more detail. This could be a call where it has created some questions, but accurate questions as to how to proceed. But one thing that I think we could touch on briefly is how Datasphere and SAC is so closely linked, because I think maybe a lot of people have heard about SAP Analytics Cloud, and I think one doesn't go without the other almost. So just briefly, maybe something around that kind of relationship and why it is critical for progressive business.
Yeah, so with SAC, it's SAP's Analytic Cloud. It's already available. It's been available for some time. It's got its own co-pilot built in called Joule, which SAP released, and they're improving this. So it allows you to extract data from S4, extract data from BW and other non-SAP systems, and to utilize it for reporting and analytics and planning. But Datasphere is the equivalent of having a robust data management tool, a data integration, data warehouse tool. So it's much more robust. It's for doing enterprise data warehousing. SAC is more front end. It's more for doing lighter work. But the fact that SAC has Joule, SAC is going to stay in terms of SAP strategy going forward. SAC will be the SAC planning is going to be improved, and Joule is going to be improved. And Datasphere will be available for you to link your large language models from different vendors and to create your own agents, etc. So I think the two will sit alongside each other.
Yeah, and it's, I think from what you were saying there, touching on again that open partner ecosystem and how you can pull data from multiple sources as well. Ultimately, I think the takeaway is Datasphere is something where it's future-proofing the business. Datasphere is not something where it's limiting how you can then interact with your other solutions, either on the front end or where you're pulling from. And ultimately, it is a choice where it's going to be the right one if you're operating within the SAP environment. It's just how we then approach that in terms of the discussion with the business. So to remind everyone, there is the opportunity to engage Ali for the initial kind of 1 hour consultation calls. If you've got some specific questions off the back of this, there's going to be 3 of those that will be free. And then, of course, further to that, for a larger piece of work, you can get in touch with Blue Wave Wider or Ali himself, and we will be coming back to people on individual questions posted in the chat and sent to us after this event to give some smaller level insights. This will also be available as a recording, so it will be a link through to SAP Network Plus, which you'll be able to share with people that will probably enjoy time with their kids, as it's half term at the moment for the UK. But at this point, I will say thank you to Ali for joining us today and giving some of his time. And to the rest of you, thanks for joining. And go watch the budget get announced, I guess. So thank you, Ali, for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot, guys. It was great having you on. Thanks, Dan.